Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, January 28th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Mununu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. On this World Lego Day today, patented on this day in 1958. So a happy 67th birthday to the Lego, an iconic item from most of our youth, collective youths.
And still going strong. I feel like Legos and Barbies are two of these toys that have found a big fan base in the newer generations.
And now movies are based on them. And so they have figured out ways to continue to advance that. And then, of course, Legos come to us from Denmark, along with Hans Christian Andersen, among the many contributions the Danes have made to pop culture and society.
Okay, plenty of news. Our top story today, advances by Chinese AI company DeepSeek, sending U.S. stocks plunging. So what is DeepSeek and what's the threat?
Yeah, freak out on Wall Street yesterday.
And in Washington, President Trump signs new military executive orders that ban transgender Americans from serving in the military, cut DEI efforts, and reinstate service members who were let go under COVID vaccine mandates. Then Elon Musk tells Germans to get over, quote, past guilt in a speech to a far-right political rally.
Just the latest controversy here from Musk over the weekend.
And it comes just days before the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, which was yesterday. Back in the U.S., Trump officials issue quotas to ICE officers to ramp up arrests. And an earthquake strikes New England with shaking felt from Boston to Portland, Maine.
Yes, New Englanders, that was an actual earthquake under your feet Monday morning.
While in Southern California, from fires to rainstorms that are now raising risks of mudslides.
Can't win down there in Southern California, though the good news is the fires are almost completely out.
Finally, women's soccer has its first $1 million player.
Yes, an American heads abroad.
And Moshe is on this day in history.
We'll take you from Lego to Jane Austen to Argo. A variety of things on this day in history.
All right, let's talk about the new Chinese AI model that created a major stir around the world on Monday. The sudden popularity of a Chinese artificial intelligence app called DeepSeek led to hundreds of billions in lost value in the stock market and captivated Silicon Valley on Monday. It also started a debate in political and tech industry circles about how the United States can maintain its lead in AI. DeepSeek announced that its new AI model was developed at a fraction of the cost of American models and uses much fewer specialized chips. The product has also become one of the top 10 performing chatbot models. It's dethroned OpenAI's ChatGPT as the most downloaded free app in the United States. It also dethroned OpenAI's ChatGPT as the most downloaded free app in the U.S. App Store this week.
Yeah, so this was a big deal on Wall Street yesterday, as well as in the days and weeks ahead here. Investors rattled by fears that Chinese advances could threaten the huge tech companies, the huge giants here in the U.S. and in Europe, the AI chip giant NVIDIA. We've told you about them before. They have become, at times, the most valuable company in the world. They lost close to $600 billion in value in market cap yesterday, the biggest drop for any company in a single day in U.S. history. The stock price plummeting 17%. It was their worst day on the market going back to 2020 during those COVID collapses. NVIDIA's drop on Monday actually led to a 3% drop in the NASDAQ overall tech index. Some context here, though. The stock soared 239% in 2023. NVIDIA soared 171% last year. The market is on edge here about the future of AI. And we should mention, I was talking to some financial folks yesterday. A lot of traders have been looking for an excuse to sell the stock, take in their profits. But it does come as there's a global fight over the future of AI here. Again, the idea is sort of it's the U.S. versus China. And yesterday, with its DeepSeek announcement, with the headlines they were making, there was this wake-up call like, whoa, is China further along than we thought they were?
Back to the technology. On January 20th, DeepSeek introduced its new product, R1. It is a specialized model designed for complex problem solving, and it was immediately praised by industry leaders as a breakthrough in AI technology. R1 was built on a previous model released in December called V3, which DeepSeek claims is on par with ChatGPT, GPT-4, and Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet. DeepSeek officials say that R1 cost just $5.6 million to train. That is a fraction of the $100 million to $1 billion estimated cost of building comparable models. Last week, Meta said it was going to spend upward of $65 billion this year on AI development. In addition, while leading AI companies like OpenAI and Google train their chatbots on supercomputers using upwards of 16,000 chips, DeepSeek's engineers claimed that they needed only about 2,000 specialized NVIDIA chips to achieve competitive results on the V3 model. Specialists note that DeepSeek's technology still lags behind OpenAI and Google, but the thing that's really got people talking is that it uses fewer of these less advanced chips, and that the costs, as we just said, are so much lower. Under the Biden administration, the U.S. sought to limit exports of chips to prevent China from advancing its AI technology ahead of the U.S. But this shows that China is advancing despite that.
Yes, the claims here that they can do it for much, much cheaper is one of the reasons why you saw that collapse in the market. Like maybe our AI companies aren't worth as much if China's figured out a way to do this much cheaper. The information, though, was provided by a Chinese-owned company, so folks in the market are taking it with a grain of salt. They're not known in China, at least Chinese government-related, for being very transparent. Venture capitalist David Sachs, you might know him from the All In podcast, also a friend of Elon Musk. He's the White House AI and crypto czar, tweeted yesterday that the model shows that the AI race will be very competitive, and that Trump was right to rescind a Biden executive order last week on AI safety that they felt created too much red tape on AI development here in the U.S. This is, though, causing a headache for the Trump administration, which made a major AI announcement last week. They're also still dealing with the fallout from the TikTok ban related to China here. And it's leading to questions as to maybe this AI app, DeepSeek, should be banned along with TikTok. It's a Chinese-owned company that's literally made to feed people information. The company based out of China, according to its privacy policy, they store information in secure servers located in the People's Republic of China, which is even more significant than TikTok, where at least the servers are in the U.S., monitored and overseen by Oracle, but there are still concerns about it. This is sort of next level, this AI situation. So this sort of leads to a question as to whether the U.S. government needs to play whack-a-mole when it comes to all these various Chinese companies and their potential influence, what they can collect here. Remember, the way ChatGPT works is they're taking in your questions, they're taking in your comments, they're taking in various thoughts that you have and using that to make the AI machines smarter. So again, that in the hands of the potential Chinese government here. Big question. Remember, as Jill just said, it is the #1 app in America right now. So stay tuned for a lot more news on DeepSeek.
All right, and that is a good transition over to the latest in politics and the new Trump administration. As the newly confirmed Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth showed up to his first day of work at the Pentagon yesterday, President Trump made headlines for 3 executive orders related to the military. So the first prohibits any transgender citizens from serving in the armed forces. Trump had already signed an order on his first day in office revoking a Biden administration directive that allowed trans people to serve openly in the military. This executive order took that one step further, banning the use of identification-based pronouns in the armed forces and saying that trans members are not allowed to serve because of issues with their mental and physical readiness. Early in his first term, Trump banned trans Americans from serving in the military, but Biden repealed that ban in 2021. Now it's back. The Department of Defense has now been directed to implement Trump's new order immediately. The second related executive order eliminates diversity, equity, and inclusion programs for the military. Trump called them woke assaults on the U.S. Armed Forces. So this means Hegseth will have final review on anything that could pass as discrimination based on DEI efforts. And finally, the third executive order reinstating troops who were pushed out of the military under Biden-era COVID vaccine mandates writes, they will not only be allowed back to serve, but they'll also be back paid for all of the time they spent out of the military. This affects about 8,000 service members who refused to get a COVID vaccine during the mandate that lasted from August 2021 to January 2023. That is about 1% of the military. Exceptions were made for medical or religious concerns. They were allowed to apply to be reinstated after the mandate was lifted, but only about 24 people chose to do so. And the issue became a rallying cry for Republicans opposing government overreach.
This is all part of what you saw from Hegseth at his hearing, a bunch of the rhetoric you heard from Trump, that they feel the military has gotten too woke. And so they're engaged on that they feel the military has gotten, quote, too woke. And so they want to engage on these subjects. By the way, that order banning trans Americans from serving criticized Biden for re-allowing them. It also criticized the government for paying for gender-altering medical treatments. The estimates are sort of all over the place in terms of how many trans soldiers there are. Estimates from various studies range from about 3,000 to 15,000 folks, though not even all of them have been public about it. These were some private studies conducted by the military. And until about 10 years ago, you weren't allowed to say if you were. So again, the estimate is somewhere between 5 and 15,000. As far as this DEI order is concerned, one of the things the document says is that DEI practices under the past 2 Democratic presidents have led to lower morale and lower recruitment numbers. Now, we should say that recruitment for the armed services actually increased last year in 2024 by 12.5% as compared to 2023, according to Defense Department numbers. But still, overall, in recent years, recruitment has been struggling. Officials there cite a variety of reasons. One, that young people are not pulled to serve like generations past. Culturally, it's just not the same thing. People aren't familiar with military opportunities and how those can affect their future. It's been a pretty competitive labor market. So that has made military service less appealing to a bunch of young people. And then there's been the issue with physical fitness limitations, mental health issues, drug use. The military has had to lower admissions requirements when it comes to drugs, physical fitness, et cetera, to try to hit numbers. I've talked to a number of recruiters who follow us in the Mo News community, and they've been struggling with all of this. So this is going to be a priority here for Pete Hegseth, along with everything else DoD does. A reminder, it's $1 trillion organization, several million civilian and military employees. We have engagements in dozens of countries around the world, bases around the world. And so we shall see. We're day one into Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. We mentioned that he just sort of skated through in confirmation there. So they're going to be closely watching all things over at the Pentagon.
Time for the speed read from Politico, the latest controversy related to the richest man in the world and Trump advisor Elon Musk. The Tesla CEO and ex-owner spoke to a campaign event for Germany's far-right Alternative for Germany party, otherwise known as AfD. On Saturday, he told the crowd that they should be proud to be German and not feel guilty about their past. This is a reference to Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. Germans from a young age were taught about the war and Germany's role in starting World War II and murdering millions of Jews and other groups of people that the Nazis believed were not worthy. It's a key part of the education system in the country, but part of AfD Party's agenda is moving past Nazi-era guilt, and it's been accused of minimizing the Holocaust and that era of German history. Here is Musk speaking to the crowd.
I think there's frankly, too much of a focus on past guilt, and we need to move beyond that. Children should not be guilty of the sins of their parents, or even let alone their parents, their great-grandparents, maybe even. And we should be optimistic and excited about a future for Germany.
As an advisor to President Trump, Musk also noted that the Trump administration is supportive of the AfD's anti-immigration agenda. AfD leader Alice Weidel, who is running for chancellor to Germany, thanked Musk and told the crowd, "Let's make Germany great again." Earlier this month, Musk and Weidel held a lengthy discussion on Musk's X platform. Musk asked Weidel to respond to allegations about the AfD's links to Nazi ideology, and she dismissed the accusations, calling Hitler a communist socialist guy, arguing that the AfD is exactly the opposite. Last year, the AfD became the first far-right party in the country to win a state election since World War II. Germany is preparing for snap elections next month after Chancellor Olaf Scholz lost a vote of confidence. The AfD is polling at around 20%, which puts them in second place. However, no other major party plans to form a coalition with them if they win.
Yeah, I'm told by German officials who are watching this very closely that they feel the ceiling for AfD in Germany. Keep in mind, there are dozens of parties. It's about 20%. And so they have to develop a coalition government because ultimately, if your party doesn't win an outright majority, you have to have enough seats. You have to have a majority of seats in the Bundestag, in the parliament there in Germany. So you have the center-right party, the center-left parties. They have united in the past. Neither side, not even the center-right party, wants to look to the right, to the AfD here. Although the AfD denies being extremist, its leaders have drawn criticism in the past for statements viewed as minimizing the Holocaust, using rhetoric around immigration that has Nazi overtones. Remember, there's a lot of sensitivity and triggers in Germany, given their history. So attacking minority groups, talking about an invasion of foreigners, multiculturalism ruining German society. People draw a line back to the 1930s and 40s there. And so, again, there's a lot of concern in German society. And you saw that play out actually in the streets of Germany over the weekend, where there were major protests against AfD, against that party. So the fact that Elon Musk took a moment here to address AfD, to endorse AfD, to actually go so forward to say that Trump supports them, and again, we haven't heard that from the White House. We got to see if Musk is speaking out of turn here or not, is significant. We should note that when you poll AfD supporters in Germany, a majority of them have a more positive view of Vladimir Putin than Zelensky. Vast majority of them don't think democracy is working for Germany. Now, again, AfD's views, not neo-Nazi by any stretch of the imagination, if you compare them to the views of Adolf Hitler and the parties back then, but nonetheless, being far-right, using certain rhetoric, again, very concerning to a number of Germans, sensitive to their history here. And Germany has a very unique way of teaching its history. You know, in many societies around the world, including, you could say, here in the US, a lot of countries are not into teaching about the ills of the past or focused on that. And in Germany in particular, in recent decades, and this is where you see the pushback from AfD, from a very young age from school, from elementary school, you are constantly confronted with what Germany did in the 1930s and 40s. In the Maine area of Berlin, you know, the equivalent of the National Mall of Berlin, you have the Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe. And so you learn your family history and what you might have done. Whereas here in the U.S., you learn about, you know, potentially a grandparent or great grandparent that was involved in World War II in terms of freeing Europe. There in Germany, you learn what potentially your ancestors may have been involved in. And so you are seeing this pushback, and there's a sort of back and forth in Germany through the decades of how hard to go on that, how soft to go on that. But again, super concerning, especially in light of the fact that it was International Holocaust Remembrance Day on a Monday. You know, Musk is already seen as controversial here. There was the incident with the gesture last week after the inauguration that critics saw as a potential mimicking of a Heil Hitler. Now, he says it was just a gesture from the heart. Nonetheless, super controversial. And then he addresses AfD over the weekend.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it came just days before the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, which was yesterday. On Monday, world leaders and survivors gathered at the former concentration camp site in Poland to commemorate the day that Soviet troops liberated the death camp at the end of World War II. Yesterday's ceremony is considered the last major anniversary of Auschwitz's liberation that any notable number of survivors will be able to attend. Given that the youngest of those at the camp are in their 80s now, given that the youngest of those who were at the camp are in their 80s now, more than 1 million people were murdered at Auschwitz by Nazi forces, many in gas chambers. Most of the victims were Jews, but the Nazis also killed Poles, Roma, Soviet prisoners of war, gay people, and disabled people.
Yeah, so 56 survivors gathered under a huge tent set up over a gate and railway tracks at the site of the former camp yesterday. Just for reference, when it was the 75th anniversary 5 years ago, 200 survivors were able to attend. Hence the concern here that ultimately, in terms of a big anniversary date here, this might be the last time you see a significant number of people. Attending the ceremony on behalf of the U.S. Was the special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. He's the one who Trump has had negotiating the ceasefire deal. You also saw Secretary of Commerce pick Howard Lutnick, Charles Kushner, Jared Kushner's father, who's now the new ambassador to France. You saw a number of other notables from around Europe, including King Charles, who was attending yesterday. Not present, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He was actually assured by the Polish government that he would be okay to attend because Poland is a member of the International Criminal Court. Remember, there is a warrant out for the arrest of Benjamin Netanyahu, which means all ICC members are obligated to arrest him. But ultimately, he decided not to attend, despite the assurances by the Polish government there. Keep in mind that there are 100-something members of the ICC, but among them who are not members, Israel, the U.S., and several other countries.
From CNN, President Trump's promised deportations of illegal immigrants began with widespread raids over the weekend. On Sunday, officials report nearly 1,000 arrests in various cities across the country. That includes Chicago, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and Austin. It is the largest amount of arrests in one day by the Trump administration ever. There have been nearly 2,700 ICE arrests since Trump's inauguration. The administration hasn't specified how many of those are convicted criminals and how many are not. Trump was reportedly not satisfied with the results of his mass deportation campaign so far and ordered quotas to be put in place over the weekend. ICE officials were told that each of its 25 field offices should make 75 arrests per day, and managers would be held accountable if they miss those targets. These operations are expected to continue across the country about 2 to 3 times a week.
Yeah, the border czar Tom Homan said he expects arrest and deportation numbers to continue to increase here. The numbers have gradually gone up from just over 200 to just over 500 later in the week, and then about 1,000 on Sunday there. Keep in mind, as far as a reference point, during Biden's 4 years, he carried out 1.5 million deportations, according to the Migration Policy Institute. That's about the same as Trump in the first term. Now, Trump has promised much more this go around. The big difference between the Biden deportations and what Trump promises here is they've lowered the threshold for who's targeted. Those Biden 1.5 million deported, mainly focused on serious criminals. In this case, Trump has said, if you're a criminal, we're going to focus on you initially, but ultimately anyone who's had a brush with the law, whether convicted or not, even a driving offense, will be part of this. And if you happen to not have committed a crime, but you happen to be here illegally and you're with someone who's a criminal, you will probably be rounded up as well. So we will see what happens here. We told you about that whole controversy yesterday with the Colombians. Ultimately, the Colombians relented here and allowed those deportation flights to happen after pushing back on them. And then Trump threatened them, saying, I'll give you tariffs if you don't take your deportees back. And so ultimately they said yes. But a lot of attention on this, Jill, includes actress Selena Gomez, who actually posted on social media on Monday tearfully that all my people are getting attacked. She writes, the children, I don't understand. I'm so sorry. I wish I could do something. She then received a lot of backlash. She then took down that post. So this is certainly getting a lot of attention out there. And I imagine, many of you who are even just scrolling social media are seeing a lot of posts, and we'll try to keep you up to date on everything going on in this space.
So I was listening to an interview with Tom Homan, Trump's border czar, about the difference between the Biden administration numbers and the Trump administration numbers, which, as we've been pointing out, are not that dramatically different, at least not yet. And he made the point to say that the Biden administration would include in those numbers migrants who were caught right at the border, basically. So like if they caught them right at the border and told them that they couldn't come in, that was considered, according to Homan, a deportation. And that was included in the numbers. That wasn't ICE going and finding somebody who was in the country illegally and deporting them.
And I think that's an important note is as we use these terms, they might be defined differently by the administrations. We might not be comparing apples to apples. And so that's something we'll We'll watch.
From NBC News, some rare news about an East Coast earthquake. An earthquake rattled New England Monday morning, causing light to moderate shaking in parts of Maine, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire.
That was a wicked shake.
The U.S. Geological Survey recorded a 3.8 magnitude quake with an epicenter off the coast of York Harbor, Maine. That's about 45 miles southwest of Portland. But people reported that they felt shaking as far as 100 miles away from the epicenter. There aren't reports of any injuries, deaths, or significant structural damage. But it was the strongest earthquake measured in the Northeast since April, when a 4.8 magnitude quake struck New Jersey, shaking the entire Northeast region. Moshe, do you remember where you were for the great quake of April?
Oh, I was in Brooklyn. I felt that shake. I knew that was an earthquake. It's actually why I tell Alex wants to hang some pictures over. She wants me to hang like photos from our travels over our bed. And, I know a bunch of people from the West Coast. And I was like, listen, in the rare case that there's an earthquake, I don't want anything hanging over a bed. But she said, come on, like, totally not going to happen. And so anyway, Alex, I don't know if you're listening right now, but this is the latest reason. I do not want to hang those photos over our bed. Let's please find another wall for all of them.
Not that I'm looking to get involved in your marital debates.
Yes.
But I'm with you, Moshe. I say there's no reason. There's enough wall space. You don't need to put anything over the bed.
All right. Well, thank you, Jill, for that endorsement. We'll see. I'm sure I'll receive a text message at some point today when Al hears the story. Nonetheless,
Jill, stay out of it. No one asked you.
Stay out of it. It'll look better there. We don't have the right. Anyway, bottom line is this. There are these very unusual events. It doesn't actually include a plate boundary. I mean, typically on the West Coast, you have a fault line between plates, right? That along the Ring of Fire there, along the Pacific Ocean, the Middle East, etc. Maine is actually far from any active plate boundary. However, minor tremors can still occur due to faults associated with the Appalachian Mountains. And so you can feel even sort of mid-plate these earthquakes. So this is a pretty rare one, though.
In other weather-related news, Los Angeles finally got its first rainfall over the weekend, and even some hail. This is after more than 250 days of dry conditions that led to the historically destructive and deadly fires that ripped across the county earlier this month. But with that rain came mudslides on Sunday, causing additional complications, including several cars that got stuck in the mud and additional road closures, although no reports of injuries. The region is still under flood watch as officials are concerned that there will be more mudslides in areas that were burned by fires.
Yeah, these burn scars are particularly susceptible to these mudslides. The earth is so dry, it's burned out, then water comes for the first time in, nearly a year in some of these parts. What are we talking about? 8-9 months. At least one fire truck battling the Palisades fire actually had to be rescued from the muck. They had to use a bulldozer to dig out a number of vehicles. Now, the good news is that ultimately the Palisades and Eaton fires, which have already torched 62 square miles, 40,000 acres, are completely contained at this time. Ultimately, there's still some shrubbery that is leading to them, continuing to burn. But the feeling is that the rain should help quench them.
From The Hollywood Reporter, Lady Gaga has announced her highly anticipated new album. It's called Mayhem, and it's going to mark what Gaga says is a return to her pop roots. The 14-track album will feature the previously released singles Disease and Die with a Smile. Gaga slated to debut her third single in a commercial break during Sunday's 2025 Grammy Awards. She said in a statement, "The album started as me facing my fear of returning to the pop music my earliest fans loved."
Yeah, you might have heard Die With a Smile. It's done very well. It's her and Bruno Mars. This new album now comes on the heels of last year's album, Harlequin, based on her Joker character, Harley Quinn. This new album is described as reinventing her early music while, quote, embracing a fresh and fearless artistic perspective. Apparently said that her creative process here resembles a shattered mirror. Even if you can't put the pieces back together perfectly, you can create something beautiful and whole in its own new way. This is going to be a big year for Gaga. You can look out for her. She's actually going to be performing at Coachella later this year alongside Green Day and Post Malone.
Beyonce set the bar extremely high for Coachella, but I feel like Gaga is a good runner-up there. And from the Associated Press, women's soccer has its first $1 million player. 24-year-old defender Naomi Girma signed the record-breaking deal to play 4 years with the Chelsea Women Football Club in England, transferring from the San Diego Wave team. The transfer fee was reportedly $1.1 million, the highest in women's history. Meanwhile, men's transfer fees could be hundreds of millions of dollars. Girma is a California native and considered to be the best defender in the U.S. She helped the U.S. women's team win the gold in the Olympics. She was brought onto the field at the latest Chelsea game against Arsenal to announce that the deal had been finalized.
Yeah, there were a number of teams that were interested in her. Girma was actually the captain over at Stanford University on their soccer team. She made her debut on the U.S. national team back in 2022. She played on the team that won the gold at the Paris Olympics. She was the U.S. Soccer Female Player of the Year back in 2023. The coach, the U.S. coach, has actually said she's the best defender I've ever seen. Girma saying it's always been a dream of hers to play in Europe, but a significant moment here for women's soccer, as it's not those wild numbers you see for the men's team yet, but as it becomes more and more popular, you are seeing the salaries, the trade numbers, etc., go up. All right, on this day in history, we begin in 1813. Famous book, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, was first published anonymously at the time in London. Fast forward to the 20th century. On this day in 1980, many of you may have seen this movie, Argo. 6 U.S. diplomats in real life on this day who had avoided being taken hostage at the embassy, fly out of Iran with the help of Canadian diplomats, dramatized in Argo. What do you got? Ben Affleck, John Goodman. Great cast of that film. A tragic moment on this day in history in 1986. I know many people, Gen X especially, who remember this moment, watching this in their classrooms. On this day, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded 73 seconds after liftoff from Cape Canaveral, killing all 7 crew members, including first teacher in space, Krista McAuliffe. An investigation ordered by President Reagan, after that determined that the disaster was caused by the failure of what was called an O-ring in one of the solid fuel rockets. The elastic O-ring did not respond as expected because of a cold temperature at launch time. It began a chain of events that resulted in a massive loss. In fact, NASA would not send any astronauts into space for more than 2 years after that, as it redesigned a number of aspects of the space shuttle. The space shuttle would go on to take astronauts into space for 2 more decades there. Now, of course, after that, after being retired, NASA has now gone to the private sector. SpaceX, Boeing, and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' company Blue Origin, as it looks to the sort of next generation of space travel. We end here with a bit of pop culture history. As I mentioned, it's World Lego Day. On this day in 1958, Gottfried Christensen, whose father founded the company Lego in Denmark, filed officially for the Danish patent for a toy building block that would become hugely popular around the world. Also in the 1950s, Elvis Presley making his first national TV appearance on this day on a show called The Stage Show on CBS at the time. And finally, in other music news, turning 30 years old today, Creep by TLC, reaching #1 on the Billboard charts.
Moshe, is always a walk down memory lane.
We do Lego. We got the Space Shuttle Challenger. We got Argo. We got TLC. A little bit of something for everybody here on the pod today.
All right, guys, that does it for this Tuesday. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
See ya.